the first section there, or the first breakdown of the chapter, I broke it down as the whole chapter I've entitled Judgment on Ungodliness, but the first portion there was the ungodliness described. So we went through all of those descriptions of their ungodliness, also listed in chapter 10, which is very much like the other chapters, but it's the way God outlined it. What I'd like to look at next is consecutive verses, and I want to look at verses 9 through 12. And in verses 9 through 12 of Hosea chapter number 10, we'll go ahead and read that. And what I want to focus on in this section is the ungodliness mourned by God. Okay, verse number 9. O Israel, thou hast sinned from the days of Gibeah. There they stood. The battle in Gibeah against the children of iniquity did not overtake them. It is my desire that I should chastise them. And the people shall be gathered against them when they shall bind themselves in their two furrows. And Ephraim is as an heifer that is taught, and loveth to tread out the corn. But I passed over upon her fair neck. I will make Ephraim to ride, Judah will plow, and Jacob shall break his clods. Sow to yourselves in righteousness, reap in mercy, break up your fallow ground, for it is time to seek the Lord till he come and rain righteousness upon you. All right. First bit then, let's break this down even further, is the recalling of Gibeah. So he says in verses 9 and 10 that he speaks there about Gibeah, and it starts off, thou hast sinned from the days of Gibeah. So what was Gibeah's sin? Well, there's about three things that I want to look at. First of all, in regard to Gibeah's sin and how this relates to the nation, to the kingdom, the northern kingdom, is that was their infamous days. And so I'd like for us to, if you would, just keep your finger there. Look, just before we leave here, go to Hosea 9, verse 9, because he mentions Gibeah again here. And he says that they have deeply corrupted themselves as in the days of Gibeah. So we spoke about that in that chapter and just simply pointed out that was a reference to their deep sin. I want to go back and look at that at some point. So Judges chapter number 19 is the reference here to Gibeah that's being mentioned both in chapter 9 and in chapter 10. Judges chapter 19, we won't obviously read both chapters, but in Judges 19 and 20, we get this understanding of their infamous days, what they were known for. And the first thing that they were known for, when he says from the days of Gibeah, obviously it referred to the sodomy. Judges chapter number 19 and verse number 22 to 24 refers to this. It says, now as they were making their hearts merry, behold, the men of the city, certain sons of Belial, beset the house round about, and beat at the door, and spake to the master of the house, the old man, saying, bring forth the man that came into thine house, that we may know him. And the master of the house, went out unto them, and said unto them, nay, my brethren, nay, I pray you, do not so wickedly, seeing that this man is come into mine house to do not this folly. Behold, here is my daughter, a maiden, and his concubine. Them I will bring out now, and humble ye them. Now that's how we know what they're talking about, okay? It was clear for this man in the house. It's clear to me too, but if you had any question about what they're talking about, now we know. Humble ye them, and do with them what seemeth good unto you, but unto this man do not so vile a thing. All right, they're not trying to take him out to the pub, right? They're not trying to take him out and get to know him, bring him out that we may know him. We just want to know who this fellow is visiting our town. So we understand that, right? What they're doing is a vile thing. It's a wicked thing, and of course that was carried out on those two ladies. And so the first thing about their infamous days is that Gibeah was the place of sodomy being carried on, but also it was a place of rape, because he did sent the concubine out, verse 25, and the men would not hearken to him. So the man took his concubine and brought her forth unto them, and they knew her, and abused her all the night until the morning. And when the day began to spring, they let her go. So it was the place of sodomy, it was the place of rape. But I want you to notice what this guy believed in chapter 20 as he was telling, remember the whole event, how it unfolded. He took his concubine after she had passed away, and I hate even talking about it in front of children, but it's in the Bible. He cut her up into 12 pieces and set those 12 pieces of her body throughout Israel, and said, speak your mind. What are we going to do about this? So they all came together because they're saying such a thing had never been done in Israel, and honestly, toward him, I think they're wondering, what kind of man are you? That's my question too. There's got to be a different way to send a message out. Anyway, so they come together and they want to find out what in the world is going on that would bring you to the place of doing this and justifying your actions. In chapter 20 and verse number 5, he explains why he was so, what his fears were. Chapter 20 verse 5, and the men of Gibeah rose against me and beset the house round about upon me by night, and thought to have slain me. And my concubine have they forced that she is dead. He believed his life was in danger that night. He believed that they were going to kill him after they defiled him. And so Gibeah, when Hosea is talking there about the days of Gibeah, he's talking about the sodomy, he's talking about the rape, he's talking about murder. They had murder in their hearts as well, and he believed that. And I believe that his host also believed that. And it wouldn't be hard for us to believe that if we just read what Genesis has to say about the place of Sodom and Gomorrah and the wickedness that was there. And so those things seem to go one with the other for some reason, because I guess you turn your back on God and you give yourself over to all sort of vileness, according to Romans 1. So it was an infamous day when he talks about the days of Gibeah. But also, if we go back again, just stay there. The days of Gibeah not only referred to their infamy, the infamy of the wickedness, but they had a determined stand. A determined stand. And so verse 9 of Hosea says, there they stood. If we look here at chapter number 20 again of Judges, verse number 13 to 16, we know the story. Now therefore deliver us the men. So they've come, right? They've come against the city. Now therefore deliver us the men, the children of Belial, which are in Gibeah, that we may put them to death and put away evil from Israel. But the children of Benjamin would not hearken to the voice of their brethren, the children of Israel. What kind of condition were they in? Spiritually. What kind of condition were they in when they heard what took place? And their response is, no, we're not giving those men over. Verse 14. But the children of Benjamin gathered themselves together out of the cities unto Gibeah to go out to battle against the children of Israel. And the children of Benjamin were numbered at that time out of the cities 26,000 men that drew sword, beside the inhabitants of Gibeah, which were numbered 700 chosen men. And all this people, boy, I'm really not doing well tonight. Among all this people there were 700 chosen men, left-handed. Everyone could sling stones at an hairbreadth and not miss. So they're warriors. What are they doing? They're going out to defend their sin. The wickedness of it. To defend the sodomy, the rape, and the murder that they would have committed if they did commit murder. They did. They murdered the concubine. So this is the days of Gibeah. It's infamous days. They have a determined stand. But then notice also, if you've still got Hosea there, just look at verse 9 again. Watch this. Israel, thou hast sinned from the days of Gibeah. Now he says again, there they stood. Now watch. The battle in Gibeah against the children of iniquity did not overtake them. What an interesting statement. Their continued rebellion. The battle didn't overtake them. If you continue reading, according to Judges chapter 20 and verse number 21, Benjamin came out to war against the other tribes, and Benjamin won the battle that day. They killed 22,000 Israelite men. So the Israelites came back again the following day, and Benjamin came out and fought with them again in verse number 25. and they killed 18,000 more men of Israel. You got to scratch your head at that. You've got to wonder what in the world is going on. It seems that God would just give them a very speedy victory, but that's not at all what happened. And I'll say something about it in a moment. But then they go out again, and according to chapter 20, verse number 35, the Lord smote Benjamin before Israel on the third event, and the children of Israel destroyed of the Benjamites that day 20 and 5,000 and 100 men. All these drew the sword. So Benjamin loses on that third battle 25,100 men on the third day. Now verse 47 of that chapter tells us 400 of those men escaped on camels. All right? Why do I say 4? 600 men. I'm just really struggling tonight. Verse 47, but 600 men turned and fled to the wilderness under the rock Rimmon and abode in the rock Rimmon 4 months. All right? So these 600 men escaped. In the very next verse, verse 48, the men of Israel turned again upon the children of Benjamin and smote them with the edge of the sword, as well as the men of every city, as the beast, and all that came to hand. Also they set on fire all the cities that they came to. And so the Israelites begin to burn all these cities of Benjamin, and you can understand that. But what's amazing to me is this. This is what I want to point out. That if you go back to chapter 10 of Hosea, we can leave Judges now. If you look at this, if you look at this verse, the battle in Gibeah against the children of iniquity did not overtake them. It didn't overtake them. I'm pondering that thing, and I'm reading, and I'm meditating, and I'm trying to work out what it is that God's talking about there. And it finally dawned on me. He's talking about, again, over in chapter 9, verse 9, they've deeply corrupted themselves as in the days of Gibeah. The battle didn't change the hearts of the people of Gibeah. The nearly complete decimation of their city didn't change the heart of the men of Gibeah. They fostered that spirit. The spirit of sodomy, the spirit of rape, the spirit of murder. And after all of that judgment, still, as time went on, God comes back and says, wait a minute, it's still there. When he talks about, again, these in chapter 9, verse 9, he says, you guys have become just like Gibeah. Then in chapter 10, verse 9, he's saying it didn't overcome them. They didn't actually put it away. It was still there. It was still part of their spirit. And as time went on, they gave themselves back over to it again. It just makes me shake my head to think about the fact that such deep wickedness that was brought with such great punishment still wasn't put away. And yet again, I say so many times on Wednesday nights and other times, so many times we're like them. We're not different to them. We can have a sin in our life, we carry it on, we come to some sort of a great consequence in our life about it, and we know that it's wrong, and we see the judgment. We might boo-hoo about it for a little while, we might turn around for a little while and go about things. It looks like we're okay, but it hasn't left our heart. And that's a great danger when we can be punished for our sin. We can even see that it's wrong, but we don't get it out of our hearts. The Lord Jesus told us that when we sin because of what's in our heart. Nobody makes us sin. That old thing about the devil made me do it is a bunch of hogwash. He can tempt you. He can entice you. But he can't make you do anything. We choose to sin. Guys, there's a great danger. And you say, well, I don't have that sin. Are we going to go ranking sin now? The fact is that if we've participated in any kind of sin, and I don't care what you want to call it, whatever it is, and we've come up against the judgment of God and still won't get that out of our hearts, it shows a great depravity and darkness in us. It shows that You'd want to say they weren't saved, somebody that behaves like that, but unfortunately the New Testament teaches us that those people, they can still be saved and just behave that way. Sometimes do you wish it was the other way? Sometimes I do. Sometimes you wish you could just say, well, clearly they're not saved, and the New Testament would say, yeah, if they do that, they're not saved. But God just warns us over and over again in the New Testament saying, why are you partakers of these evil deeds that these unsaved people do? Guys, we better guard our hearts carefully. And even the thought of sin that we hang on to had better be purged, because we cannot harbor things in our heart and expect that it won't come to fruition. Anything we harbor in our heart will come out in our life. It will. And that's a frightening thing, a frightening lesson there in Hosea 10:9. All of that, the battle against them still did not overtake them. And I'll tell you what this represents. It really does represent the moral failure of Israel. Because not only was Gibeah home to great wickedness, but at Gibeah, 11 other tribes were also punished in that war. And that's what I wanted to say about those men that were lost. About 40,000 men who weren't Benjamites, who weren't in Gibeah, who came against a great wickedness, lost their lives. Why does God do that? Because it was a reflection of the moral condition of the whole nation. God is absolutely just. And He's absolutely right in everything that He does. Why would He allow 40,000 men who seem to be standing against a great wicked wrong? Why would He allow them to die? Because it was just no different than what was going on in the rest of the nation. It's only in chapter 17 of the book of Judges that we read that there was no king in Israel, and every man did that which was right in his own eyes. Now guys, look at the danger of this whole scenario here that we're looking at. Was it right for them to want to rid the nation of the wickedness of Gibeah? The answer is yes. But they're justifying themselves as they're doing it. It's this idea of, I'm not as bad as they are. They deserve judgment, but not me. I can do what's right in my eyes, but they can't, because that goes beyond what I'm willing to do. And it shows a deep hypocrisy in the nation, and a deep wickedness that was just running so, again, deep, so coursing through their veins that they could justify themselves, and they could even justify going and killing off the best part of a tribe and not see anything wrong with that. We better be very careful about pointing fingers. We better be very careful about how quick we are to want to correct somebody else's sin. Isn't that what Jesus said in Matthew 7? You know, the world loves to quote Matthew 7, judge not lest you be judged. They just don't like to quote the rest of it that tells us that with what judgment you judge, you shall be judged also yourself. And He tells us not to judge with hypocrisy. How is it that I can say, oh, you've got this little piece of wood in your eye and I got a big beam sticking out of mine? But isn't that how it is? Well, I'm not doing what they're doing. And look at how wicked. Well, it is wicked, but what you're doing is wicked. Isn't that human nature? We love to pick on everybody else's sin and overlook ours. Guys, that's what was going on, and this is what He's referring to. And so He comes there and He just simply says in verse number 9, he starts off with, oh, Israel. Can you hear the mourning in God's voice? Oh, Israel. You're just the same as you were in the days of Gibeah. And He says this then in verse number 10. He says, this is my desire. It's my desire that I should chastise them. I want to say, this isn't in my notes, but in reading that word, I want to say something about chastisement. Chastisement comes because somebody cares. Because somebody loves them enough to try to correct them. And it is going to mean anger, and it is going to mean pouring out of some judgment And in some cases, as we're seeing here, it's going to be wrath. No doubt. But can you see the overcoming love of God in that? In that He says, I want to chastise you. God, according to Hebrews chapter number 12, chastises so that He can bring forth the peaceable fruit of righteousness. He doesn't chastise like earthly fathers who do it for our pleasure, to gain something for ourselves. He says, I want to gain something for you. I'll chastise you so that you'll yield fruit that's good and right and pleasant to my eyes. So he says there again, it is my desire that I should chastise them, and the people shall be gathered against them when they shall bind themselves in their two furrows. So God's desire on Gibeah to chastise them. Again, would you keep your finger there and go over to Deuteronomy chapter number 28. Deuteronomy chapter 28. Now, in your own time of reading, I'm not going to read all of this, but in your own time of reading, I would suggest you read chapter 28, verses 15 through 68. And that's why we're not going to read it all. But I would suggest you read it because God lays it out very plainly there. But here's what we'll do. We'll grab verse 15 because that'll show you the context. God's telling them in verses 1 through 14 how He wants to bless them. And He will bless them if they'll be obedient. But verse 15 is the change in the tide. And so verse number 15 he says, But it shall come to pass, if thou wilt not hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God to observe to do all His commandments and His statutes which I command thee this day, that all these curses shall come upon thee and overtake thee. All right, so from then on it's just, this is going to be a curse, this is going to be a problem, I'm going to bring drought, I'm going to bring famine, I'm going to bring chastisement, I'm going to bring, and it's just one horrible thing after another. Now look at verse number 47. Verse number 47 and 48. And watch what he says here. And to me, this is such a critical thing that we better pay close attention to. Because thou servest not the Lord thy God with what? What is it? With joyfulness. That's pretty specific. Because there's some people go, well, what's the problem? I'm doing what I was told. I was in church. I gave. I prayed. I gave out gospel tracts. Yeah, but where's your joy? See, true legalism, true, genuine, strict definition legalism is believing that you have to do something to get saved. But what most people refer to as legalism today is that you have to do certain acts in order to keep God happy. Okay? So we'll use it in that context. There's a lot of legalistic Christians out there. Because they believe if you do certain things that God is required to be happy with you. But they got a sour attitude. They do it only for the show of it. Their heart's not in it. They don't love the Lord enough to do it. They're just doing it because maybe they think the pastor's going to get after them. Maybe they'll get a phone call or a text message. Well, I have to do it because I don't want to get in trouble. That's what happens, guys. And I want to go, why can't you do it just with some joy because you love the Lord? Why do you have to have attention for it? Why do you got to be recognized? Why do you got to be slapped on the back constantly and told how great you are? Right? Why can't we just serve God with joyfulness because it's the right thing to do? And we don't have to have somebody standing behind us and sometimes just standing behind us and pushing us down the track and boo-hooing when somebody's not constantly by our side so we can cry on their shoulder. Guys, seriously, some Christians just need to grow up. They need to mature up and grow up and just serve God because it's right to do. Please don't get angry with me. This is being plain, guys. So he said to him there, verse 47, Because thou servest not the Lord thy God with joyfulness and with gladness of heart for the abundance of all things, therefore shalt thou serve thine enemies. That's a frightening statement to me. Which the Lord shall send against thee in hunger and in thirst and in nakedness and in want of all things, and he shall put a yoke of iron upon thy neck until he have destroyed thee. Well, what did he say to Israel? If you don't just serve me with some joy and some gladness in your heart, then you're going to serve your enemies. That's what he told them. Now I know he's talking to Israel there, but we better take that to heart. Listen to what he has to say. All right. Go back to chapter number 10. Hosea chapter 10. Oh, no, don't go. Don't lose your spot. I'm getting ahead of myself. Stay there, chapter number 28. Now, I better say this now before somebody gets bent out of shape, okay? I'm going home and bent out of shape. Because I know that there's sometimes we need a word of encouragement. And you've heard me say that from the pulpit. Sometimes folks need a word of encouragement. Sometimes they do need an arm around them, and they do need a shoulder to cry on. And there's times that you weep with those who weep, and we don't beat each other down, we help each other up. I understand all that. But look, there's a certain element that's all they ever want. That's all they ever want. And that's not right. That's a problem in the heart of that person. That's a problem, okay? So I understand, and I'm sure somebody is typing an email to me right now. Verse number 63. And it shall come to pass that as the Lord rejoiced over you to do you good and to multiply you, so the Lord, watch, will rejoice over you to destroy you and to bring you to naught, and ye shall be plucked from off the land whither thou goest to possess it. This is the apple of God's eye. This is His chosen people. God said, I rejoiced over you to bless you. Now I'm going to rejoice over you to destroy you. What kind of God is He? He's a just God. Perfectly balanced in everything He does. What's God's desire on Gibeah? I'm going to chastise you. I'm going to chastise you, and because of your continued idolatry, I'm going to destroy you. Think of it this way. If the thing can't function the way it's meant to function, is it worth keeping it? If a car is constantly breaking down and you can't drive it, you say, I've poured twice the amount of money that the car is worth into it to keep it running, and it still won't run. You going to keep it? And you're going to keep pouring money into it? I'm not. I'm driving it in the paddock and I'm letting the rust have it. Right? That's how you need to view what God's saying here. How long do you want me to invest in you, to bless you, to keep you, to watch over you, to give you all of these things that I promised I would, while you go on giving credit to the other gods, building your altars and building your idols, and you just go on and on down this track? How long do you want me to do this, Israel? You know what their response was? Just keep pouring it on, God. What's wrong with that? God said, absolutely not. I will rejoice to destroy you, so I don't have to keep investing in you, and you squander my goodness and my blessings. And that makes good sense to me. The day was going to come when the chastisement would be on top of them, and God's chosen oppressors would stand against them. That's verse number 10 again. It is my desire that I should chastise them, and the people shall be gathered against them. Assyria, of course, was the people that God used. And in the same way that the 11 tribes had come against little Benjamin, so now God would send the armies of the enemies against these 10 rebellious tribes. And Ephraim is so unwilling to forsake their ways that God says this about him. He refers to them as binding themselves in their 2 furrows, at verse 10. When they shall bind themselves in their 2 furrows. So what are the 2 furrows? I'm going to give you 3 possibilities that are all very closely related. Go to Jeremiah chapter 2 and verse number 13. And we'll look these up tonight, and then we'll finish. Jeremiah chapter 2 and verse number 13. So there's 3 possibilities that I want to give you here. Jeremiah 2 and verse 13. This was the first one that came to mind. And God said this, "For my people have committed two evils. They have forsaken the fountain of living waters and hewed them out cisterns, broken cisterns that can hold no water." So, forsaking God and joining themselves to idols is what they're referring to here. All right, go over back to Hosea chapter 10 and verse number 1. And the second of the two furrows we're looking at here is he says in chapter 10 verse 1, and again, after the first one I went, well, the context though would point more toward this. Israel is an empty vine. He bringeth forth fruit unto himself. According to the multitude of his fruit, he hath increased the altars. According to the goodness of his land, they have made goodly images. So the two things mentioned there are the multiplied altars and the images, right? So we're still at idolatry. The first one was forsaking God, joining themselves to idols. The second one is making altars and images or idols. And then, of course, we won't turn to it. We've looked at it that many times. 1 Kings 12, verses 28 and 29, the two furrows possibly being the two golden calves that Jeroboam built and put in Dan and Bethel. I think in the past I keep saying Dan to Beersheba, and it's just out of a habit of saying it because of the length of the land, but I want to say Bethel. So if I ever say Beersheba, you know that I know what I mean. I'm just not getting it out the mouth right, okay? But he put two idols in, two golden calves, said, "These be thy gods, O Israel, one in Dan and one in Bethel." Maybe those are the two furrows. But once again, what is it? It's idols. So all the fingers that he's talking about in verse number 10, when they shall bind themselves in their two furrows, is a reference to these two stumbling blocks of idolatry, no matter which way you look at it. They would bind themselves as though, the imagery is this, it's as though they're laying themselves down in their graves, the furrow. You know what a furrow is, I guess. Everybody understands a furrow, deep trenched in the ground. But they they're binding themselves to their idols as they go into the furrow. As though they're going down into the grave, but they still won't let go of their idolatry. They're still not going to give it up to try to save themselves. So they're willing to just be planted in the furrows with their idols. Both the southern and the northern kingdom were guilty of this sin of idolatry. And there's no doubt in my mind here that there is an allusion to both when he says they shall bind themselves in their two furrows. But the emphasis is clear. Here it's Ephraim and Israel, the northern kingdom. And there's no question in my mind that the furrows at least refers to the idols. At least refers to the idols. If not the idols and the altars and those other things that came with it. What were they doing? They were digging their own ditch. Digging their own grave and willing to die there. And even when God brought judgment, they're clinging to their idolatry. Still not willing to give it up. So I ask you tonight as we close, what about you and I? What about you and I? I know we may not have images set up in our homes. I hope not. But there's certainly idols that can be in our hearts. Covetousness is idolatry, God said. Certainly there could be something in our life that's constantly causing us to stumble in our walk with the Lord. And yet no matter what happens, we seem to cleave to it. Surely tonight we can think of some things that would be in our life that if we could just be honest with ourselves and honest with the Lord tonight, we would say, that thing right there, I don't have to have it in my life, but I keep it in my life because I love it and I don't want to get rid of it and I know what God's Word says about it, yet I won't let it go. And what I would ask us tonight is, why are we so much like Israel? When we know the judgment's coming, we can read about it, and we can even see that God in love wants to chastise us for it so that we'll yield the fruit of righteousness, peace and righteousness, and yet yet won't let it go. Christian, I don't know, and I don't have anybody in mind tonight. I'm analyzing myself. Sat in my office today and thought about it for a while today. Guys, I'm telling you, we just need to think about what the Word of God means when we read about it and see what Israel is doing and say, God, where does this apply in my life? What is my idol? What is my altar? What is it that I'll sacrifice everything on? Even though I know it's not pleasing God, even though I know it causes me to stumble. What is it? And then, man, would God help us to just confess it and forsake it and be crucified to it. Paul said that he's crucified unto the things of the world, and the world was crucified unto him. Surely as we sit here tonight, somebody would think in their heart, there's this thing. Maybe all of us. Let's take a lesson from Israel. Father, please bless tonight. Please help us to be sober about what we've heard. Please help us to be honest with you. Now, God, there may be people sitting here tonight that can honestly say there's nothing they're cleaving to, nothing in their life that they're aware of that's displeasing to you, that causes them to stumble. And if that's the case tonight, Lord, I pray that you bless them and keep them from it. And for those tonight who may say that there is a particular thing that causes them to stumble, would you help them to just get rid of that idol out of their life and not take the path that Israel took? God, we know it'll destroy them. It'll bring them to naught. Please help them. Help us. Thank you for these lessons from Hosea. Thank you for their practical application in our life. And there's no way that we're going to be able to apply it unless you help us. But we want to be pleasing to you, God. Please help us to do that. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.